Iraqis under 25 have never known a day when their country wasn't being bombed, sanctioned, or occupied by the United States. Maybe that's why 93% of them see the US as their enemy.
والله أنا أشوف الأمريكان طبعاً أعداء للعراق، لأن هذا كل قاعد يصير ببلدنا من تفجيرات من اغتيالات، هي أمريكا مخططت له من قبل الاحتلال.
So why can't the US quit Iraq? Ideological reasons aside, Iraq holds a key strategic location for the US, a location that's filled with oil resources, military bases, and pretty close allies. But that's meant different things over the decades. Let's start with 1980, when Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, launched a war against the newly minted Islamic Republic of Iran. The US jumped at the opportunity to weaken the republic, which in 1979 had ousted one of the US's most loyal allies, the Shah. So the Iran-Iraq war became an opportunity for the US not only to weaken the Islamic Republic and its anti-American leader, but also to prevent any communist influence that could enter the region as a result of losing a major ally. The US gave aid, top-secret intelligence, and weapons to Iraq throughout the 8-year war. And to make things more complicated, some members of Ronald Reagan's administration were also facilitating the secret sales of arms to Iran during the 80s through Israel. The reason? To stay friendly with those in the Iranian government that seemed sympathetic to the US. Now, it was also during this time that the US helped Iraq develop chemical weapons it later used against the country's Kurdish minority. And when the United Nations tried to sanction the Iraqi government for those abuses, it was the US that blocked any action. Ultimately, the war claimed over 1 million Iraqi and Iranian lives. US interests shifted once again when the Iraqi military invaded Kuwait in 1990. Iraq accused the oil-rich monarchy of stealing its petroleum and was coming to seize what it said was rightfully Iraq's. That didn't make America too happy. Kuwait was a major supplier of oil to the US. And the Saudis weren't too excited either. They not only shared the border with Iraq, but were also home to large oil reserves. The first Bush administration worried it wouldn't be too long until Iraq would want to invade Saudi Arabia. So, a US-led coalition launched Operation Desert Storm in 1991, which consisted of 5 weeks of aerial assaults against the Iraqi military and civilian targets, followed by a ground operation. Meanwhile, the UN imposed harsh sanctions that crippled the Iraqi economy and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, including a reported 500,000 children. Those sanctions lasted throughout the 90s, during the presidency of Bill Clinton, who vowed to remove Saddam Hussein from power. Clinton imposed no-fly zones and military operations in Iraq. The goal was, apparently, to protect the Kurds and Shia Muslims and isolate Saddam to weaken him. But the opposite actually happened. Saddam was able to consolidate his power in the face of foreign aggression. So by the time the 2003 invasion of Iraq happened, the United States had already been at war more or less with Iraq for more than a decade. And while the reasons for the invasion ranged from so-called weapons of mass destruction to the gift of democracy,
we have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people.
Many speculated from the get-go that the real reason was, again, about Iraq's oil. And instead of finding WMDs, the US found itself in a quagmire it couldn't control. And instead of democracy, the US gave Iraqis a civil war, a broken economy, the Abu Ghraib prison, unaccountable private contractors, sectarian strife, and hundreds of thousands dead. America also dissolved the Iraqi army, creating a vacuum of up to 300,000 armed and unemployed men, many of whom would go on to join and build ISIS. The same ISIS that President Barack Obama is now trying to degrade and destroy through bolstering US military presence, once again in Iraq.
Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL.
So with decades of US military involvement in their country bringing little good, is it really a surprise that so many young Iraqis are just fed up?